I heard my husband's voice carry across the restaurant patio as he laughed with his blonde secretary. You know how these successful black women are, always thinking they're queens, always demanding respect they haven't earned. My wife acts like she's doing me a favor by coming home every night. The wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the concrete as I stood frozen behind the decorative hedge that separated the dining areas. If you've ever discovered that the person you trusted most was using your deepest insecurities as entertainment for another woman, this story will hit you like a freight train. Hit that subscribe button because what happens next proves that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply walk away. You know that moment when your entire world shifts on its axis? When everything you believed about your life, your marriage, your worth suddenly reveals itself to be built on quicksand? That's exactly what happened to me on a warm September evening at Meridian, the upscale restaurant where I thought I was meeting my husband Marcus for our 9th wedding anniversary dinner. But let me take you back to the beginning, because every powerful ending starts with a story worth telling. 10 years ago, I thought I had found my soulmate. Marcus Washington was everything I dreamed of in a partner. Intelligent, driven, charismatic, and he pursued me like I was the most precious thing on earth. I was 27, working as a senior financial analyst at one of Chicago's most prestigious investment firms. He was 32, building his consulting business from a one-man operation into what would become a multi-million-dollar company specializing in corporate restructuring. Those early years felt like living in a romantic novel. Marcus would surprise me at work with lunch from my favorite Thai restaurant, complete with handwritten notes tucked between the containers, saying things like, "For the most brilliant woman I know, you're going to run Wall Street someday." He'd show up at my company events, introducing himself to my colleagues and supervisors with genuine pride, telling anyone who'd listen that his girlfriend was the smartest person in any room. When I closed my first major deal, a complex merger that had been stalled for 8 months, he threw a surprise party at our apartment, inviting all our friends to celebrate what he called my genius girlfriend's latest victory. When I made senior analyst at 29, the youngest black woman in my firm's history to reach that level, Marcus surprised me with a weekend in Napa Valley. He spent the entire trip talking about how proud he was to be with someone so accomplished, how much he admired my work ethic and intelligence. He would introduce me to strangers as my incredible girlfriend who's changing the game in finance. I felt like I was living in a fairy tale where the prince actually saw and valued the princess for her mind, her ambition, her strength. Our wedding 3 years later was everything we'd dreamed of. An elegant ceremony at the Palmer House with 200 of our closest friends and family. In his vows, Marcus promised to support my dreams, celebrate my successes, and stand beside me as I conquered every goal I set. He spoke about how my drive inspired him to be better, how my intelligence challenged him to grow, how lucky he felt to build a life with someone so extraordinary. I believed every word. For the first 5 years of marriage, we were that couple everyone envied. We bought a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park, combining our finances and our futures with complete trust. I supported his business ventures, staying up late to review his proposals and strategize about client presentations. He celebrated every promotion, every successful quarter, every industry recognition I earned. We talked for hours about our dreams, my goal of eventually starting my own investment firm, his vision of expanding nationwide. We were partners in every sense of the word. But success has a way of changing people, and somewhere around year 6, Marcus began to transform in ways so subtle, I almost missed them entirely. It started with small comments disguised as jokes. "Looks like the boss lady is home," he'd say when I walked through the door after a long day. But the affection in his voice had been replaced with something that sounded almost like resentment. When I'd share exciting news about a big deal or a client coup, he'd smile and nod, but his enthusiasm felt forced, mechanical. The compliments that used to flow naturally became rare, then non-existent. The surprise gestures of love and support stopped altogether. Our conversations shifted from dreams and ambitions to logistics and complaints. When I suggested we plan a vacation to reconnect, he'd say we were too busy. When I tried to discuss feeling disconnected, he'd accuse me of overthinking or being too demanding. I convinced myself it was normal. Every married couple goes through phases, right? The honeymoon period couldn't last forever. I told myself he was just dealing with the pressures of growing his business, that his distance was temporary stress, not permanent change. So I tried harder, planned more date nights, cooked elaborate dinners, suggested couples activities we used to enjoy. But the more effort I invested, the more he seemed to withdraw. The red flags were obvious in hindsight, but love and denial make powerful blinders. Marcus started working out obsessively, something he'd never shown interest in during our entire relationship. Suddenly he was at the gym every morning at 6, spending 2 hours after work lifting weights. Along with the new physique came new clothes, expensive shirts, designer cologne, perfectly tailored suits that cost more than my monthly car payment. His phone became his most treasured possession, always face down, always password protected, always buzzing with messages that made him smile in ways I hadn't inspired in months. He'd take it everywhere, the bathroom, the backyard, even on our increasingly rare walks around the neighborhood. When I'd tease him about being addicted to social media, he'd get defensive and accuse me of being controlling. The late nights at the office multiplied and became more elaborate in their explanations. Big client presentation tomorrow, he'd text at 8 p.m., not coming home until after midnight. Team dinner with potential investors, he'd explain, returning with the scent of expensive perfume clinging to his jacket. Networking event that could change everything, he'd claim, though his networking apparently never included me anymore. Most painful of all were the subtle ways he began undermining my confidence. Comments about my work being pretty intense, or my ambition being a lot for some people to handle, became more frequent. He'd make jokes about successful women being high maintenance or difficult to please in front of our friends. When I'd call him out on these remarks privately, he'd gaslight me into thinking I was being oversensitive or taking things too personally. The breaking point came on what should have been one of our most romantic evenings together. Our 9th wedding anniversary fell on a Friday, and Marcus had suggested dinner at Meridian, an upscale restaurant downtown that we'd been to for special occasions throughout our relationship. He'd made the reservation, chosen the time, even suggested I wear the black dress he used to say made me look stunning. I spent 2 hours getting ready that evening, choosing my outfit carefully, doing my hair and makeup with the same attention I'd given our first dates. I wore the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 5th anniversary, and the perfume he'd once said drove him wild. I wanted to look beautiful for him, wanted to remind us both of the passion we used to share. When I arrived at Meridian, the hostess told me my party was already seated on the patio. I followed her through the restaurant's elegant interior, past the bar where couples were sharing intimate conversations, through the French doors that led to the covered outdoor dining area with its twinkling lights and romantic ambiance. That's when I saw him. Marcus was seated at a corner table with his back to me, leaning intimately toward a young blonde woman I recognized as Jessica, his 25-year-old administrative assistant. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture that was anything but professional. The scene looked like a romantic date, complete with wine glasses, shared appetizers, and the kind of body language that spoke of attraction and intimacy. My first thought was confusion rather than anger. There had to be an explanation. Maybe this was a business dinner that had run late. Maybe he'd invited her to discuss our anniversary celebration plans. Maybe I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. But as I stood there watching them, hidden behind a decorative hedge that separated 2 sections of the patio, their conversation became clearly audible. "She really doesn't appreciate what she has," Jessica was saying, her voice carrying that fake sympathy young women use when they're trying to sound wise beyond their years. "I mean, you work so hard to provide for her, and she just takes it all for granted." Marcus laughed, a sound that used to make me feel loved but now felt like a weapon aimed at my heart. "You have no idea what it's like living with someone who thinks the world owes her everything. She comes home from work acting like she's cured cancer or something, expecting me to celebrate every little achievement like she's the first woman to ever have a successful career." The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing harder than the last. This was my husband, the man who had once celebrated my every success, now mocking my professional achievements to impress another woman. But he wasn't finished destroying me. "You know how these successful black women are," he continued, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Always thinking they're queens, always demanding respect they haven't earned. My wife acts like she's doing me a favor by coming home every night instead of being grateful that a man like me chose to marry someone like her." The wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the concrete patio with a crash that seemed to echo across the entire restaurant. But neither Marcus nor Jessica noticed, too absorbed in their toxic conversation to register the sound of my world falling apart. Jessica giggled, actually giggled, at his cruel words. "I just don't understand women who can't appreciate a good man. You're successful, handsome, ambitious. Any woman would be lucky to have you. She should be thanking God every day instead of making your life difficult with all her demands and expectations." "Exactly," Marcus said, and I could hear him moving closer to her. "That's exactly what I mean. You get it. You understand that a relationship should make a man feel good about himself, not like he's constantly being judged or found lacking. You appreciate what you have instead of always wanting more." Standing behind that hedge, listening to my husband of 9 years reduce me to racist stereotypes and gender-based insults to seduce his assistant, something fundamental broke inside me. Not just my heart, though that was certainly shattered beyond repair, but something deeper, my faith in love itself, my trust in the promises people make, my belief that the person who knows you most intimately will also protect you most fiercely. This was the man who had pursued me relentlessly, who had proposed by saying he couldn't imagine building a future with anyone else. This was the man who had stood before our families and friends, promising to honor and cherish me for better or worse. This was the man I had trusted with my heart, my body, my financial security, my dreams of family and forever. And he was using all of it, my race, my success, my expectations of basic respect, as ammunition to seduce a woman barely older than our college interns. But along with the devastating pain came something unexpected. Crystal clear, life-changing clarity about who this man really was and what I actually meant to him. All those months of self-doubt, of wondering if I was being too demanding or unreasonable, of trying harder to save a marriage that was already dead, it all suddenly made perfect sense. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't imagining problems that didn't exist. My instincts had been absolutely correct. This man had fallen out of love with me, had been emotionally cheating for months, and instead of having the courage to tell me the truth, he had chosen to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. I took a deep breath, straightened my dress, and stepped out from behind that hedge with my head held high. The look on Marcus's face when he saw me standing there will be burned into my memory forever. Pure terror mixed with guilt and shock, like he'd been caught committing murder. His mouth fell open. Jessica's face went completely white as she realized I had heard every word of their conversation. The romantic ambiance of the patio seemed to shift, other diners beginning to notice the tension, conversations stopping mid-sentence as people sensed drama unfolding. Without saying a single word, I reached down and slowly, deliberately removed my wedding ring. The 3-carat solitaire that had once symbolized forever, that I had worn every day for 9 years, that had represented our unbreakable bond and shared dreams. I held it up so Marcus could see it clearly, making sure he understood exactly what was happening. Then I placed it gently on their table, right between the wine glasses and shared appetizers, with a soft clink that sounded like a gavel ending a trial. "Enjoy your evening," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the hurricane raging in my chest. Then I turned and walked away, leaving my husband, his mistress, and the ruins of our marriage behind me forever. I heard Marcus call my name, heard his chair scraping against the concrete as he jumped up to follow me. But I didn't stop, didn't turn around, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I walked through that restaurant with my spine straight and my dignity intact, got in my car, and drove directly to my best friend Alicia's house across town. I didn't cry until I was safely behind her guest room door, and when the tears finally came, they weren't just tears of heartbreak and betrayal. They were also tears of relief. Relief that I finally knew the truth without any doubt or confusion. Relief that I could stop exhausting myself trying to save something that had been dead for longer than I wanted to admit. Marcus didn't come home that night, probably because he knew I wouldn't be there. When he finally tracked me down at Alicia's 2 days later, he found exactly what he should have expected. Divorce papers prepared by the best family attorney in Chicago, and a clear message that all future communication would go through my lawyer. The begging started immediately and continued for months. Desperate phone calls, text messages from different numbers, emails to my work account when I blocked his personal communication. He showed up at my office building, my gym, the coffee shop where I met clients. He even started calling my parents, my siblings, our mutual friends, anyone who might be willing to advocate for him. His story changed depending on his audience. To my family, he claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd been networking with a potential client and said things he didn't mean to impress a business contact. To our friends, he insisted I had overreacted to innocent workplace socializing and was being unreasonable by refusing marriage counseling. To me, through intermediaries, he promised to fire Jessica, to quit drinking, to do whatever it took to save our marriage. But here's what Marcus fundamentally failed to understand. You can't unsay words like that. You can't apologize your way out of revealing your true character. You can't take back the moment when you show someone exactly how little you respect them, how willing you are to betray them, how easily you can reduce them to stereotypes when it serves your purposes. All those months when I thought he was just distant or stressed, he was actually building a case against me in his mind, taking my strengths and reframing them as weaknesses, my successes and turning them into threats, my identity as a black woman and weaponizing it against me. Every day I was fighting to save our marriage, he was already emotionally checked out and planning his exit strategy. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, which meant everything we'd built together over 9 years got divided fairly. The brownstone we'd renovated with love, the investment accounts we'd contributed to equally, the business assets we'd accumulated together, all of it split right down the middle. Marcus was genuinely shocked to discover that his successful wife had actually been contributing more to our shared wealth than he'd realized or acknowledged. Without my income supporting his lifestyle, without the impressive home and luxury cars that had been jointly owned, without the social status that came from being married to a rising star in finance, Marcus suddenly looked a lot less attractive to young women seeking successful older men. The funniest part came about 2 months after I'd walked out of Meridian. Jessica, who had been so eager to console him about his demanding, ungrateful wife, abruptly decided she wasn't interested in dating a recently divorced man with significant financial obligations and a reputation for talking badly about his partners. Turns out when she realized that divorce meant Marcus would lose half his assets, pay substantial alimony, and be starting over financially in his 40s, the successful consultant she thought she was stealing suddenly seemed like more trouble than he was worth. She'd been attracted to our life together, not to him as an individual. Once that fantasy crumbled, she moved on to easier targets. As for me, I threw myself into rebuilding my life with energy and focus I hadn't felt in years. Without the constant emotional drain of trying to save a dying marriage, without the stress of living with someone who was lying to me daily, without the exhaustion of constantly questioning my own perceptions, I found myself more creative, more productive, and more successful than ever before. 8 months after our divorce was finalized, I got promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategic Investments, becoming the first black woman to reach executive level in my firm's 90-year history. A year later, I bought my own penthouse condo in River North with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. I started traveling to places Marcus had always said we couldn't afford: Morocco, Japan, New Zealand, destinations I'd dreamed of exploring but had put off for some day that never came. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while trying to be the perfect wife. I pursued hobbies Marcus had never shared: pottery classes, salsa dancing, rock climbing. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been dormant for years. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts again, to value my own perceptions, to believe in my own worth. I realized the woman Marcus had tried to diminish and discard was actually extraordinary, strong enough to walk away from a comfortable life when it came at the cost of self-respect, smart enough to recognize manipulation and emotional abuse, even when it came from someone I loved, successful enough to rebuild completely and end up better than before. 2 years after that devastating night at Meridian, I ran into Marcus at a professional conference. He looked older, tired, smaller somehow. His business had struggled without the stability my income had provided. He'd moved to a modest apartment in the suburbs. The confidence that had once attracted me to him seemed diminished, replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. He approached me hesitantly, clearly wanting to talk. For a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. But then he opened his mouth, and the first words out were about how good I looked, how successful I seemed, how much he'd made a mistake letting me go. Even in that moment, even after losing everything, he still didn't understand. It wasn't about what he'd let go. It was about what he'd never truly valued in the first place. He'd never seen me as a partner worthy of respect and protection. He'd seen me as an asset to be managed, a trophy to be displayed, a problem to be solved when I stopped being convenient. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus," I told him gently. "But more than that, I hope you figure out why you threw away something real for something that was never going to last." He started to respond, but I was already walking away. I had places to be, dreams to pursue, a life to live that was bigger and brighter and more authentic than anything we'd built together. That night, alone in my beautiful home, surrounded by art I'd chosen and books I'd wanted to read and space that was entirely mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in the final years of my marriage. Complete peace with who I was and where I was going. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful statement you can make. Sometimes the person who promises to love you forever is actually incapable of loving anyone, including themselves, in a healthy way. But most importantly, I learned that your value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. The right person will celebrate your strength instead of feeling threatened by it, will support your ambitions instead of competing with them, will protect your heart instead of using it for target practice. Ladies, if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your worth isn't determined by how someone treats you when they think no one is watching. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept, and you deserve someone who sees your success as something to celebrate, not something to tear down. Subscribe for more real stories about finding your strength, knowing your worth, and never settling for less than you deserve. Remember, the right love will never require you to make yourself smaller to receive it. What are you teaching the world about your value? I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you are worthy of love that lifts you up, not love that tears you down.